welcome to our premiere podcast of our series Inside Industry. I'm Erwin Kretschner, based in Vienna. I'm the head of InterSearch Practice Group Construction and Infrastructure. We have today selected a topic that's real estate development, trends and challenges. And I do have the pleasure of talking to George Bobvos. George is a seasoned expert and C-level manager with a career spanning over 40 years, with highlights in real estate development, the production of building materials, construction and engineering, and also a large tenure in commercial banking and investment banking. George has been working in 16 countries, and he is a true global and cosmopolitan citizen by speaking 9 languages. So, welcome today to you, George. I'm happy to have you with us.
Well, thank you very much. I am honored to be, I understand, the first guest of yours. So I do look forward to our discussion, Erwin.
Very well. George is based in the lovely city of Rovinj in Istria, Croatia. This is a pleasant place to be and an even more pleasant place to work. So happy to have you with us. George, perhaps we can start with you sharing with us your current professional roles. You have actually dual roles. You are a development consultant with the global Windham Resource and Hotels Group, and at the same time you're also consulting with a regional project and property and real estate developer called DDG, a Croatian group. So perhaps outline to us and to our listeners what the key tasks are that keep you currently professionally busy.
Well, I have the pleasure of working with these two very distinct, but at the same time, very professional and interesting companies. Permit me to start with Windham. Windham is a spin-off of the largest private equity company, BlackRock, and is actually a new venture of that kind. It's the largest hospitality group in the world, in the sense that it has the largest number of hotels in their system. But because this is a franchise type of agreement that these members are linked to each other, the name of Windham Hotels and Resorts is probably less widely known than those of the 25 individual brands that they have. My task is to help their expansion in Southeast Europe, and these are basically all countries between Italy and Turkey, with the exception of Greece, that they have a very established business. So I have this pleasure of both helping the expansion, market expansion, but also the development profile. It's an American company. It's important to mention 70-something% of their assets is in the States, about 20% in Asia, and less than 10% in Europe. So I think Europe for them is an important market, and it's my pleasure to help their expansion. DDG, on the other hand, is a Croatian development and project management company based in Rijeka, so rather close where I live. It's 100% privately owned by a gentleman who has made his name in the football game. and created an agency first for real estate, and then from this agency, with the help of business partners, developed a project management and construction company, basically targeting resort and hospitality developments in the Kvarner and Istria region. And I am very happy to be their head of business development. Where I help them are typically large scale hospitality related new projects, where for which I bring also investors in many cases, or hotel operators. So it's a very pleasant dual role, actually acting on behalf of a global leader in the hospitality industry, but also for a regional Croatian domestic, if you like, successful player in the industry.
Thank you, George. Very interesting to get a bit of an insight in your current masters, so to speak. We're living in interesting times, I would say. So it would be interesting to have your perspective of growth opportunities for the business sectors that you both principals are engaged in. Would you be good enough to share a little bit of vision and plans as far as growth potential for both Windham as well as DGG would be concerned?
Well, I think, we can probably differentiate between certain asset classes, because trends and developments in the hospitality industry are markedly different from other asset classes. So I would probably start with hospitality. I try to speak more on the global trends, but also to take into account what is happening in my region. And what I see is that there have been two major changes in the last couple of decades. One is that the ownership of hospitality assets that has been concentrated in the hands of mostly financial institutions or family offices or investment trusts. So institutions and wealthy individuals, and the operational business, so managing hotels, if you like, or being a franchise partner, that has been separated from the ownership and has become the main business line of hotel companies, operators, in short. And why this is important? Because I think the skills and also the funds that are needed for both are different. It's a capital heavy industry if you would like to be an owner, but it's a very competitive service industry if you would like to be an operator. So it's not a mistake that operators are concentrating their knowledge on the service part. And this is something that I see very clearly as the tendency. Now, the pandemic has also played a major role, because I think we still remember that a couple of years ago, there were some people saying, well, now this is the end of the hospitality world. People will not travel, etc., etc. I still remember reading statistics. How long will it take for the industry to regain its position? Well, actually, what happened is the opposite. When the pandemic ended, people were very eager to meet up in person, both in terms of business and in terms of private travel. And I think this is a global tendency. Now we are witnessing that in many cases, people are requested by their employers to get back from home office to the office. And what it also means is that personal interactions are on the increase, and people like to travel. People like to spend money on traveling. This is true for Europe, but also globally. So this is a tendency that, for example, helped the construction of new hotels, but also new resorts and a lot of entities in the hospitality industry. There is also a big tendency that is the creation of second homes, typically, I would call them middle-aged buyers who then at a certain stage may even relocate, and from this second home, they could create a primary home. By the way, many people say that the western part of Croatia, and this is namely Istria and the Kvarner region, could one day become the Florida of Europe, in the sense that many wealthy people will be very keen on relocating over here. So I think what we can say is that there is a booming hospitality industry. What I think suffered a bit more in terms of other asset classes is offices and retail, for different reasons. I think retail as an asset class has been saturated. You know, there was a tendency to build retail shopping malls, outlets, and all sort of structures in anticipation of buyers coming in and running a successful business. In many cases, this did not happen, and many shops were closed or are being closed. So I think retail is probably today a less attractive asset class. I can say that globally, also in Europe, but also in my region. Then you have offices, which is a very interesting topic, because I still remember the time when, companies wanted to attract potential employees and employees by having flashy and very modern offices with a lot of different benefits. And they built typically in prime locations, very expensive buildings. And then the pandemic hit, and there was even a talk that people will not be going back to office life, but rather would be staying at home. We see that this also is not happening because of various reasons. So now also the office market is picking up, but I think that is very much depending on the changes and developments in the labor market, because we also have to say that there is a generational topic. Younger generations may not be that keen on completely going back to office life. They would like to have a hybrid mode, or in many cases, they prefer working purely on a remote basis. So I think this is still something that we will have to see. And then the fourth asset class, just to finish up the round, would be, I think it's a global tendency, residential property, and to become property owner has become a very, very challenging task, especially for the younger generations. I think, Erwin, I can say that we belong to a generation where we thought that the next generation and their life should be in a much better position than what we had back a couple of decades ago. And what we see is the complete opposite. We could still manage to become property owners step by step. Today, because of the sky-high residential property prices in many countries. This is mission impossible. And then, governments and cities innovate certain structures, helping the younger generations for their first property ownership. So this is something that is a fantastically interesting new development. And then this is also connected to student housing and a lot of other stuff. And then just very quickly to mention the last, I think it's number 5 asset class, and that's industrial property, warehousing, e-commerce, etc., etc. Now this is really booming because this location of the assembly lines has become a very sensitive topic. So people would like to bring closer to their home market the production facilities, the warehousing facilities. There is a tendency to return certain portfolios from, say, Asia to Europe. Also, we see that in the United States, but also Europe, and to a certain extent in Asia, this is a market that is quite fluid and is changing a lot. So I think when I look at all the 5 asset classes, this is something that is full of changes and new developments. And this has always been like that, but I expect further changes to come in all of these asset classes too.
Okay, thank you for a very comprehensive overview of asset classes, George. I would like to come back to the residential housing topic. Now, as you have already pointed out, on one hand, a key task is for all developers to, and for communities in particular, to provide affordable housing, affordable living. That's a big task because we are globally talking about an age of urbanization where people move from the countryside to cities. Cities are growing by leaps and bounds, and this is a fundamental task for communities to provide this housing on an affordable base. We exclude for the time being the upmarket residential housing. The second issue is, of course, not in addition to affordability, is, of course, that we have environmental issues and environmental targets and objectives to meet. And that would be the next big topic for the builders per se to comply with environmental standards. I've just picked up a interesting figure from the Building Performance Institute of Europe, BPIE, who states that buildings in general, of course, not only residential, account for 43% of Europe's energy consumption. That's a quite striking figure. Would you think that all builders and all parties engaged in the industry are aware of this challenge? And if so, how are they meeting these requirements of being ecological and environmental friendly?
I can confirm that in terms of sensitivity and impact, buildings represent the largest chunk. Here, I think, if we talk about Europe, because you mentioned the European Commission paper, what we have to face is that typically our buildings are old. It's an organic growth that our continent has gone through. Cities were spreading. Why? Because they created job opportunities that were not existing in other places. So people flocked to these major cities, and our building portfolio has become oldish. You can do certain things in terms of, insulation, making them a bit more greener, but it's very costly. So I would rather concentrate on how to use better technologies in case of new build for the future to avoid the problems that we have with the existing building portfolio. And here I think we are helped by a lot of new technologies that concentrate on making these new properties environmentally friendlier, greener, and also I think more advanced in terms of technology. There are tons and millions of different methods and tricks used by designers, construction companies, and developers how to achieve this. I think the maturity of each market dictates how much importance that country is paying to these topics. One of the brightest examples, I have to say, Erwin, is your country, Austria,
Mm.
that pays a lot of attention to these topics. And I think that when it comes to renovation of old buildings or new build, you have obligatory rules that are basically making it a necessity for the developers to take these new methods in the account when, designing, constructing, developing those buildings. This is especially present in two asset classes, that is offices and residential. Why? Because we people spend most of our time in those two asset classes. Hotels and other asset classes are slightly lagging behind these two other asset classes simply because you you have large individual buildings. You have a sort of mass of concrete usually. But again, just to give you an example, I spent a lot of time in the cement industry. And just to give you that as a sort of hint, cement was invented in about 1840. And so you can say that cement worldwide has a history of about 180 years. And there were attempts to replace cement by something else, with glass, with aluminium, with some other stuff. And from my perspective, it did not succeed. So we are again back to old gray cement. So we will have to sort of be a bit more open in terms of with what type of building materials we can build the buildings of the future. I still believe cement will play a key role. All the cement producers today have one major problem to tackle, and that is CO2 emission. But they are doing that. I think it's fair to say that the cement industry globally is aware of these issues and is very much doing what they can in terms of their production process and cycle to help creating building materials that then become parts of buildings.
Mhm.
And in that way, these buildings become greener.
Absolutely. That's an interesting point you're mentioning. I think particularly the cement industry is also tasked with the requirement to recycle material from demolition sites. And I think this is something that they are actively practicing. If you follow them, the big players in the industry, would you see it? And of course, this is very much supported by marketing and press releases and communication to be a good corporate citizen. But would you see such recycling of construction material on the ground in the area you're operating right now, where you have insights? Is this happening? Or is this perhaps a bit of window dressing, if I want to use a harsh word?
I think it does happen, especially in case of large and institutional projects. People are, demolishing old buildings and using bricks, for example, as a sort of raw material for the new building materials that they will be using. Also, there are more and more cement plants that,
Mhm.
in terms of energy consumption, are negative. So, what they do, they create more energy than what they use. And the way they can do it is they recycle old stuff. If I can simplify my comment, in such a way that they save on energy costs and create products that are much more environmentally friendly. Uh, Large hotel groups these days are very, very keen on complying with ESG because of two reasons. Just as an example, one is that clients or hotel guests or buyers of branded properties like it and demand it. So it's becoming an industry standard. And second is that, okay, to be honest, these changes do not automatically mean cost saving. I think this is quite important that from a purely cost point of view, these changes at the very beginning may actually result in higher production costs. But then over time, this cost handicap is diminishing. So actually, the sooner you start the process of adjusting your production, the better for you because the quicker you will be in a position where your energy consumption and the cost of production could become, in many cases, zero or even negative. And there is also a new phenomenon, which I think is somehow this climate change that, many people debated a couple of years ago. We all see is happening. I live in an area where we have a fantastically green environment, but we used to have very standard seasons, four in a year. Now, very often, you have two seasons. You have summer and winter. And winter is rainy without much snow. You can even see that ski resorts are having problems to provide snow. And what they had to turn to is to produce artificial snow. Well, I don't think this is the solution, but what I try to say, the climate change has become so obvious that those industry players that don't pay attention to it may actually just lose out. And in the contrast, those who are paying attention could only benefit from it. Again, I have to say, in Europe, um, Swiss, German, Austrian, Polish companies are playing a very, very important pioneering role in all this. And yes, I can say that from my daily experience, this is indeed happening. It's not only a marketing, statement or campaign. People are, I would not even say reluctantly, people who are seeing these changes happening more and more also internally accept the need to to adjust.
Thank you very much for that insight. I'd like to touch on one final but important point. As you've rightly mentioned, renovation of buildings is a good thing to do, particularly when you have an environment, a city environment with old traditional buildings. And rightly so, I think Vienna in particular, but also in Austria, there's great emphasis being given to this topic of renovation. On the other hand, a renovation of buildings does need manpower, and all the companies engaged in this sector are short of manpower. But it also goes for new construction sites that the one of the key topics is to find the operators, to find the equipment operators, and to find managers, project managers who are able to deal with new technology and while they're having a construction engineering background. Um, we have, I think, two fundamental issues to address and to comply with. One is the demographic issue of an elderly population, and the second is migration movements from places where there used to be enough people to places where there is a shortage of it. What's the environment? What's your environment facing your current professional environment facing in terms of ensuring human resources supply to the projects where they are needed?
I think this is a fundamental issue that, based on my experience, can only be dealt in a very proactive way. You rightly mentioned demography, which is not playing in our favor, especially not in Europe. And then you have construction industry that is consisting of a lot of blue collar jobs, and then some of them are white collar, but both of them need education and training. So I think our first challenge is how to make these positions attractive, because for the younger generations, it's not at all normal or natural to start working in these positions. They may not be perceived as attractive enough. At the same time, I can say that there is a lot of projects that would never ever happen if there is no import of foreign workers. And this is the case, I can say, in Croatia, where you typically from Asia import um, blue collar type of work in the absence of domestic resources. And I'm sure that this is very similar all around Europe. So I see this as an immediate answer to the general shortage of manpower, but this may not be a long-term solution. I think the long-term solution would be to somehow create an environment where these professions are popular and attractive. And there is a state or city or industry sponsored educational system that attracts young people to these professions. Again, if I may use an example, the part we are living in within Croatia is probably well, by a big margin, the most developed in terms of tourism and hospitality. It's Istria. Um, I think it's fair to say that there is a general lack of handymen in all professions. In return, these people, if they can be found, they earn many times more than very often professors at universities. I don't say this is negative. I don't say this is positive. This is a fact. So the rarity of these jobs makes these people quite well off. In that sense, I think that the more people will be trained and made somehow attracted to these professions, both domestic and possibly from importing them, the more large-scale projects could happen. Because what we see now is that, okay, you might have a fantastic vision for a new build. You might even have the funds. You have the equity, you have the debt financing. But what if there is no construction stuff that can help you making that idea a reality? And this is very often an issue. Now, I did hope that, for example, Turkish companies that are very successful in their own country or even in the wider Middle East could probably in larger numbers be present in Europe. But so far, this is not the case, mainly due to the restrictions that applies to these companies. So I think solving this issue is one of the top priorities for the industry, no question about that.
Thank you very much, George, for your valuable insights today. This was Dr. George Bobvos, development consultant for Windham Hotels and Resorts and investor representatives for DDG Group. This is the first episode of our series Inside Industry, presented to you by InterSearch Worldwide. I'm Erwin Kretschner. Thank you for listening in. I look forward to welcoming you at the next of our events. Thank you very much and goodbye.